This one is a classic. Let's do it. The Shining opens up by introducing us to Jack Torrance, and he is at the Overlook Hotel in an interview to be the caretaker of the hotel for the winter. So, this hotel is located in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado and closes for the season every winter. During the interview, the manager, Stuart Ullman, tells Jack that one of the previous caretakers, named Grady, went crazy one winter and killed his two daughters and his wife and then himself, and the police just chalked it up to cabin fever. But Jack insists that he and his family will be fine, and he's a writer, so he's actually looking for some peace and quiet to write his next book. So back in Boulder, we meet Jack's wife and son, Wendy and Danny Torrance. Danny immediately starts exhibiting this weird behavior, like he has this imaginary friend named Tony. And when Wendy gets a doctor to come look at him, he tells her that Tony lives in the back of his mouth. And Danny speaks in Tony's voice and does this little finger movement when he does. Now, while the doctor is there examining Danny, Wendy tells her about this previous incident between Jack and Danny. And she tells the doctor that Jack was an alcoholic, and one day he came home from work and Danny had scattered some of his papers all over the floor. And in this drunken rage, he grabbed Danny so hard that he dislocated his shoulder. But since then, Jack has been sober for the last few months. At one point, we see Danny in the mirror talking to himself as Tony. And we can tell that he has some kind of psychic ability because as Tony, he's saying to himself, yeah, Jack got the job and he's about to phone Wendy to tell her. And sure enough, he's right. Jack gets the job, and not long after, he and the family set out for the Overlook Hotel for the winter. So they get to the hotel, everybody's packing up and getting ready to leave, and Stuart Ullman is showing Jack around. And they also meet Dick Halloran, who is the hotel's head chef. And as Dick is showing Wendy and Danny around, at one point he looks at Danny and communicates with him without speaking. And a little bit later, when he's alone with Danny, he tells Danny that this ability is called the Shining. And not everybody knows that they have it, but you have it, and that's how we're able to speak without speaking. So the Shining is like this telepathic psychic ability. Now, during this, Dick also informs Danny that the hotel itself also shines. The reason it shines is because there have been terrible events that have happened at this hotel. And during this, he also warns Danny about the hotel room 237, and he tells him to never go in there. So everyone leaves and it's just the family, and eventually we cut to a month later. And we see that Danny is starting to have these visions, including these two twins. So one day he's riding on his little trike through the halls and he comes upon the twins and he has a vision of both of them murdered brutally. And it turns out that these are the murdered daughters of Charles Grady, the previous caretaker. We also see that Jack is starting to decline as well, even though honestly he wasn't really all there from the start. He uses this room as a writing room, and one day Wendy comes to check on him and he's just super fucking rude to her and tells her to fuck off. And one day he wakes up screaming and tells Wendy that he had this dream of him violently killing her and Danny. One day when Danny's on his trike, he passes room 237 and sees that the door is open. And something lures him in there, and we don't see what happens to him. But a little bit later, he comes down to find his mom and dad, and Wendy sees that he has these marks all over his neck as if he's been strangled. And she immediately blames Jack for it. So Jack goes to investigate room 237 to see who could be in there and who did this to Danny. And he sees this young, beautiful woman in the bathtub who gets out and approaches him and starts making out with him. As they're kissing, Jack opens his eyes and looks in the mirror and sees that she has turned into this old, decrepit woman with her skin rotting off. But he goes back to the room and tells Wendy there was nobody in room 237, and actually, I think that Danny did this to himself. So again, at this point, Jack is fucking losing it, pretty much has lost it, and he ends up at the hotel bar. And it's there that he sees the apparition of a bartender named Lloyd. And Jack ends up taking a drink from Lloyd and breaking his sobriety. A little bit later on, a butler spills a drink on Jack and takes him to the bathroom to clean him off. And he introduces himself as Grady. So Jack is like, I've heard of you, Mr. Grady. You hacked your wife and kids into pieces and then killed yourself. Grady at first denies it, but then he looks at Jack and he's like, are you aware that your son has called for assistance? And what he means by that is we have seen that Danny has telepathically called out to Dick for help. And Grady says, when my wife and kids tried to defy me, I corrected them, so go correct yours. Jack proceeds to go to the hotel's radio, which is their only means of communication, and destroy it. Meanwhile, Wendy ends up going into Jack's writing room and looking at his typewriter, and he's been typing what she thinks is a novel this whole time. But when she looks at it, it is hundreds and hundreds of pages that just say, all work and no play make Jack a dull boy. And as she is flipping through all these pages, Jack shows up behind her. So Wendy starts crying and telling them that they need to get Danny to a doctor, something's wrong with him. And Jack is becoming more and more threatening, and he is approaching Wendy, and she starts backing up these stairs. Meanwhile, she has a baseball bat that she took with her. So Jack basically tells her, "We are not leaving this hotel. I have a responsibility. And I'm not gonna hurt you, Wendy. I'm just gonna bash your fucking brains in." But as he gets closer to her, she knocks him unconscious down the stairs with the baseball bat. So Wendy ends up dragging Jack down to the kitchen where she locks him in the pantry, and she tells him that she's gonna go call for help or she's gonna take the snowcat down to town. And Jack just laughs at her and is like, "Yeah, good luck doing that." And Wendy discovers that the radio has been destroyed and the snowcat has been destroyed as well. So there is no escape and there is no calling for help. Because I think I forgot to mention, but it's winter in Colorado, so there is also this crazy blizzard going on right now. So this whole time we've seen Dick Hallorann, who is in Florida, getting these telepathic messages from Danny, and he is on his way to Colorado to help. So Wendy goes to get Danny, and down in the pantry, we see that Jack is freed from the pantry by Grady. Back in the hotel room, Wendy is awoken when she hears Danny screaming the word "red rum" in Tony's voice, and she wakes up to find that he's also written it in lipstick on the door. But when she goes to hug Danny, she looks in the mirror and sees that this is murder written backwards. And then the moment she has that realization, Jack starts axing his way through the door. So Wendy and Danny hide in the bathroom, and Danny's able to escape through the little window, but she's too big. And Jack proceeds to start axing this door down to get to Wendy, but she manages to cut his hand with a knife. So Jack backs off and leaves, and meanwhile in the lobby we see that Dick Hallorann has arrived. Help is here, the day is saved. Just fucking kidding, because Jack immediately kills Dick with an axe. R.I.P. Dick deserved better. So when Dick gets murdered, Danny can feel this telepathically, which causes him to scream out loud, which gives away his hiding space. So Jack starts to come towards him, which causes Danny to run. And now he has nowhere to run but outside. So the hotel has this massive hedge maze, and Danny runs into it. Back in the hotel, Wendy frantically runs around looking for Danny, where she encounters all of these spirits in the hotel. And she also sees that iconic image of a cascading waterfall of blood coming from the elevators. So Danny's running through the hedge maze, and it's very clear that Jack is following his footprints. So Danny, in one of the smartest decisions made in horror, backs up in his own footprints and hides in one of the bushes. So Jack loses his footprints and starts to just kind of go through the maze randomly. So this allows Danny to backtrack and follow his own footprints back out of the maze. So he runs out of the maze just as Wendy is running outside, and the two of them reunite and they get in the snowcat that Dick had driven up, and they get the fuck out of there. And then we cut to the next morning and we see that Jack Torrance has frozen to death in the hedge maze. The movie ends by showing us this picture that is hanging up in the Overlook Hotel. And at the center of this photo that was taken in 1921 is Jack Torrance, and the movie ends. If you have questions and have no idea what the fuck I just said, I did a whole deep dive on this movie and Dr. Sleep on my podcast, so go check it out.